Where did the Guanches really come from? A question that has baffled historians, archaeologists and geneticists for centuries. Because their physical appearance and their complete isolation in the middle of the Atlantic seem to belong to a different story. Today we'll leave behind the legends and myths to focus on their DNA, on the genetic footprint that the Guanches themselves left in their mummies, and which, thousands of years later, allows us to reconstruct an origin as unexpected as it is fascinating. When Europeans first arrived in the Canary Islands, they discovered something unexpected. A people who had lived in complete isolation for centuries, without contact with the outside world, and yet possessed a surprisingly complex culture for such a remote archipelago. They were the Guanches, and their origin, even today, remains one of the great enigmas of the Atlantic. Chronicles and anthropological remains describe some of this population with physical traits unusual for an African island. Fair skin in many groups, tall stature, and even blue or green eyes in some individuals. Where did they really come from? The most advanced genetic studies have revealed something even more mysterious. The Guanches are not descended from any modern people, nor can they be directly related to the present-day Berbers. Instead, their DNA points to a much older lineage, a prehistoric population from North Africa that disappeared over time, but left the Guanches as one of its last descendants. A deep origin shared with peoples who existed thousands of years ago, but without direct equivalents today. The Basques would be the people they most closely resemble, as was mentioned in the 19th century, with cranial comparisons of Guanche remains. However, the most unsettling question is another. How did this ancient lineage arrive in an archipelago lost in the Atlantic? And why did it become completely isolated? Archaeological studies show no evidence of vessels capable of crossing long distances, and yet someone in the distant past crossed the sea, populated the islands, and forever severed their contact with the mainland. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, studies of mitochondrial DNA, that is, DNA inherited exclusively through the maternal line, began. One of the key studies was published in 2004 by Maka Meyer and her team. This study, which you can view on screen, analyzed mummified remains and Guanche skeletons over 1,000 years old. The result was surprising. Most maternal lineages belong to haplogroups linked to prehistoric North Africa, but not to modern Berbers, rather to a much older ancestral population of Caucasian origin. Among them, one lineage stood out that is now almost a symbol of indigenous Canarian genetics: haplogroup U6b1. This subclade appears clearly in Guanche bones, but is practically non-existent in North Africa today. It is as if it has been preserved only in the Canary Islands, trapped by centuries of isolation. Furthermore, the studies detected haplogroups such as H1 and H3, which have an ancient history in Western Europe. These lineages are associated in the genetic literature with European Paleolithic populations, the early modern anatomy groups often referred to as Cro-Magnon man, and with the large post-glacial migrations that repopulated the Mediterranean and the Atlantic coast thousands of years ago. This means that, in addition to their clear North African roots, the Guanches retained genetic fragments that connect them to an ancient Euro-Mediterranean population network that extended throughout the Paleolithic. Years later, larger studies, such as the work by Fregel et al. 2019, which you can also view on screen, analyzed complete mitogenomes of Guanche individuals from different islands. These analyses confirmed the presence of Mediterranean and North African lineages, and nuanced the idea of a single settlement. The original colonization involved the arrival of a diverse set of lineages, some shared with Paleolithic European populations and others with prehistoric North Africa. In short, mitochondrial DNA studies showed that the Guanches were, genetically, a mosaic. They preserved unique North African lineages, such as U6B1, and at the same time retained traces of ancient connections with prehistoric Europe, represented by populations alluding to Cro-Magnon. The arrival of the Castilians between the 15th and 16th centuries did not signify the biological end of the ancient Guanches, but it did profoundly transform the archipelago's genetic makeup. After the conquest, a long process of mixing with European colonizers, especially Castilians, began. This process changed the distribution of lineages, particularly paternal ones, which decreased drastically. However, modern genetics demonstrates something crucial, that although the Guanches as a group have disappeared, part of their genetic makeup continues in the current population of the Canary Islands. The study that marked a turning point was the genomic analysis led by Rodriguez Varela in 2017, which compared ancient Guanche individuals with current inhabitants. The results showed that modern Canarians maintain between 16% and 31% autosomal Guanche ancestry, at least in the samples analyzed from Gran Canaria. This figure not only confirmed genetic continuity, but also revealed an asymmetrical mixing pattern. The indigenous heritage persisted more through the maternal than the paternal line. This aligns with the results of the massive study of 896 modern mitogenomes published in 2022, digging into the admixture strata of current-day Canary Islanders. This work, which you can view on screen, demonstrated that on average, more than 50% of the maternal lines of the current population descend from pre-Hispanic indigenous women. In other words, the Guanche imprint remains especially prevalent in the female lineage. But what is most interesting is that this heritage is not evenly distributed across the archipelago. La Palma and La Gomera have some of the highest percentages of indigenous maternal ancestry, with U6B1 and H1 lineages persisting notably. Tenerife shows greater admixture with European lineages, but still retains a significant proportion of indigenous mitochondrial DNA. Gran Canaria, according to the 2017 study, is where the most studied autosomal proportion was measured, with the aforementioned 16 to 31% Guanche ancestry. El Hierro, due to the massive depopulation during the conquest, shows less and more diluted continuity. Fuerteventura and Lanzarote have indigenous components present, but also significant subsequent mixing due to migrations and repopulations after the conquest. Genetics has allowed us to glimpse the past, but even with all the analyses, the Guanches remain a people shrouded in mystery. An ancient lineage isolated in the middle of the Atlantic, whose profound origins and prehistoric trajectory continue to raise more questions than answers. Their culture, their features, and their arrival on remote islands continue to challenge historians and modern science.